Large crowds of people on Wednesday broke into a United Nations aid warehouse in Gaza, the Palestinian enclave now on the brink of famine. The World Food Program said initial reports were that 2 people had died and several more were injured. Eyewitness video independently verified by Reuters showed crowds pushing into the warehouse in the central city of Deir al-Balah and removing items as gunfire rings out. It was not immediately clear how the deaths and injuries had occurred.
مجاعة حقيقية صحيح، فيش مجال، احنا استوينا بكفي، هي انا قاعد على الدور، الله يعلم يصلي الدور ولا ما يصليش. الذل اللي ذلناه عمري ما شفته في حياتي الا السنتين هدول. احنا الحمد لله عندنا بيتنا وعندنا سيارتي وعندي شغلي وكل شيء اموري تمام. اليوم احنا مش لاقيين ناكل اكل، مش لاقيين نطعم اولادنا، لا خبز لا طحين لا ميه، لا المكان هذا مكاني ولا اي حاجه، والحمد لله ايش جابوا اكثر من هيك.
The war in Gaza was triggered after Hamas-led Islamist militants stormed Israeli communities in October 2023, killing about 1,200 people, according to Israeli tallies. Since then, Israel's military campaign has killed more than 53,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza health authorities, and displaced nearly all residents from their homes. Under mounting international pressure, Israel lifted a months-long aid blockade on Gaza on May 19th. Since then, it has allowed a limited number of relief to be delivered either through the United Nations or the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, which began deliveries this week. However, Israel ultimately wants the UN to work through the GHF, which is using private US security and logistics companies to transport aid into Gaza for distribution by civilian teams at so-called secure distribution sites, like the one that was broken into on Wednesday.
احنا وقفنا على التكية وما حصلش نصيب واخذنا، وعندي طفل سوء تغذية شديد بظل الحصار الشديد وبظل انعدام الموارد وعدم دخول المساعدات. الآن نحن نطالب ونناشد جميع العالم انهم يطلعوا لاطفالنا، يطلعوا للستات الكبار، يطلعوا للناس اللي مش لاقيه قوت يومها.
طفل
11 شهر طبق ال10 شهور. اليوم كم على التكية، كم هائل على التكية، الناس جعانة، الجوع قتل الناس، والحمد لله تعدينا احنا، خلاص انهلكنا انتهينا.
Aid officials say families at these sites will be screened for involvement with Hamas militants, potentially using facial recognition or biometric technology. The UN and other international aid groups have refused to work with the GHF. They say the private company's aid distribution plans are insufficient for reaching Gazans, and that the scheme is not neutral. On Wednesday, the senior UN aid official for the occupied Palestinian territories, Jonathan Whitall, described the GHF plan as, quote, surveillance-based rationing that legitimizes a policy of deprivation by design. On Wednesday, the senior UN aid official for the occupied Palestinian territories, Jonathan Whitall, described the GHF plan as, quote, surveillance-based rationing that legitimizes a policy of deprivation by design.
احنا شعب إلنا 70 سنة بنموت قاعدين، ولا حد مدور علينا ولا حد مطلع علينا ولا حد فينا وين انتم. لكن ايش بدنا نقول؟ حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل، هاي اللي بنقوله. وهذا اكل الاولاد بس.
رز حبة طويلة.
ايش بيقهر يعني عندي 21 نفر ودي كيلو طحين 100 شيكل كيلو طحين مش قادرين نشتريها. قالوا في مساعدات جينا نجري، والله بجري قاعد مش قادره امشي، اجي الاقي بيقولوا لي ولا حاجه ضل، يشحوني كرات بحملا وواحد ما ياخذش لو كيلو طحين لو قلنا يصير ما بنفعش يعني هذا الكلام. يعني عن جد والله الواحد انا احس حالي بدي انقهر يعني بدي اطوق. ايش يعني هذا فوضى، هذه فوضى.
Slovenia's UN ambassador said on Wednesday that some members of the 15-member Security Council are working on a draft resolution to demand unimpeded aid access. Meanwhile, the UN ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, told Reuters it was, quote, sad and disgusting that the UN and other groups would not work with the GHF. He described the foundation's aid distribution as, quote, effective so far. The GHF says that across 2 sites currently open, it has so far given out the equivalent of nearly 850,000 meals. The foundation said it is working to open 4 sites and expand further in Gaza in the weeks ahead.
Hereby inform the United Nations and the Security Council that the legislation concerning UNRWA's activities in Israel will officially come into force in 48 hours on January 30. In accordance with applicable Israeli law and following the termination of the provisional agreement, UNRWA must cease its operations and evacuate all premises it operates in Jerusalem.
Mr. President, members of the court, no humanitarian aid or commercial goods have been allowed into Gaza since the 2nd of March, which has devastating humanitarian consequences in the Gaza Strip.
Israel decided not to take part in this circus. It is another attempt to politicize and abuse the legal process in order to persecute Israel. The goal is to deprive Israel of its most basic right to defend itself. In the October 7 atrocities. Just one example.